Welcome to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you're having an outstanding start to your evening, start to your Wednesday morning. Of course, you can find Hammer Territory across all forms of social media, myself at StatsSAC, and as always, one of the best when it comes to covering Braves baseball, my co-host at B_Outliers, Stephen Tolbert. Stephen, good to talk with you, sir. Hope you had a good long weekend, and it's nice to talk with you again after a Braves win.
Hey, what's up, Shawn? Yeah, it's been a minute since me and you have done one of these, and obviously, quite a bit has happened. Some significant developments have taken place since the last time you and I were talking into microphones. So we've got a lot to get to tonight. It's going to be a full show with multiple games to cover, and obviously some massive injury news. But yeah, it's always good to do these with you, buddy.
Absolutely. And, you know, of course, Hammer Territory being a part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts, make sure to subscribe to Hammer Territory. Whenever you subscribe, that's where we'll be for free. Just hit that subscribe button and you'll get all the latest content when it's available. And of course, we'll get into all that has been going on over the past several days over the Memorial Day weekend. Of course, me and Stephen will also give our thoughts, on the big news that's happened, of course, being Ronald Acuna Jr.'s season-ending injury. But let's get to a positive, and that is Max Fried. Again, yes, it's a recurring theme. Pitching for a team that's supposed to be the best offense in baseball. But at the very least, we do have something that continues to make us one of the best teams in baseball, and it's just been the outstanding production of our pitching, especially our starting pitching. And listen, Steven, we've talked all season long about how the pair of Ronaldo Lopez and Chris Sale are one of the more underrated duos in baseball through the first fourth of the season. But I think when you look at Ronaldo Lopez, Chris Sale, and now Max Fried may be the most dominant of those options. He's tied the mark for the most starts, going 6+ innings while giving up no hit in a start. He's done that twice this year. Only one other pitcher in Braves history has done that. Every single time out now, he is absolutely dominant, and it's great to see. But when we talk about this Braves pitching staff, we've talked about Sale and Lopez so much, but you add Fried to that mix. Now I think it's hard to find a duo right now who is performing at the level of Chris Sale and Max Fried. And the good thing about those two, no disrespect to Ronaldo Lopez, but when it comes to Max Fried and Chris Sale, I really think it's sustainable. It's awesome to see what Fried's doing.
Yeah, I mean, especially after, he got off to that brutal start to the year where I think he got knocked out of the first inning in the first game, got knocked out of the third inning in the second game, had like an ERA of like 38 or something like that after two starts. So yeah, it's been, he's down to after tonight, he threw eight shutout innings tonight. He's got his ERA under 3. He's got a 2.97 ERA. So obviously that's much more Max Fried like, and he's not only has been pitching really well, he's been pitching really deep into games. He's throwing 7, 8, 9 innings pretty consistently right now, and the bullpen's essentially getting a night off when he pitches. Iglesias came in and cleaned up the 1 inning, the 9th inning tonight, but that was it. Everybody else got the night off, so that's another huge part of it. When your best pitchers not only pitch well, but pitch deep into games, your bullpen gets a free night off, even when there's not an off day in the schedule. So, but Max has looked great. He's running the highest ground ball rate of his career. He's getting everything on the ground. Again tonight, multiple double play balls. Even when he's not striking a ton of guys out, he's not having like he's running one of the lowest strikeout rates he's ever run in his career to this point. But he's getting, if you're not going to strike guys out, then the next best thing to do is to get the ball on the ground. And that's what he's doing in spades right now. It's just everything is on the ground. He's, 65% ground ball rate so far this year, which is absurdly high. That's elite. So yeah, it's been good to see. The Braves need it. Obviously, the offense is still not, we're going to get into it a little bit later, but the offense is still not clicking. It was a 2-0 win tonight. And the Braves are kind of winning off the backs of elite pitching right now. I mean, when they get elite pitching, they win. And if they don't get elite pitching, then they're usually losing the game. And that's a dangerous way to go through life. That I don't recommend continuing that for very long, because, it's tough to keep that up and still maintain any sort of decent record. But right now, that's kind of what's working for the Braves is, if they get a game where they, throw a shutout or 1 or 2 runs, they're doing pretty well, but anything more than that, they're having trouble. So that's going to be the next thing, is get the offense going where the pitching doesn't have to be so elite to win these games.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. I think that one underrated aspect of how good the Braves starting pitching has been is that it's been efficient. Even with Charlie Morton yesterday, listen, he wasn't efficient. Not really going to talk much about yesterday's game because it was just a bad game. You're going to have one of those every now and then. The Braves, got beat pretty badly by the Nationals. But even in yesterday's game, he went 5+ innings to keep the bullpen from having to work, a lot in a single game, especially in this stretch where we've had 17 straight games. But we're not just talking about the quality of pitching when it comes to this Braves team. They are being efficient in allowing for themselves to work 6-7 innings, and that is very, very valuable to a bullpen. The Braves bullpen already was one of the deepest in the game, but if we can continue to see these innings numbers from the starters be 6-7 innings and they're low stress innings, it really helps out the bullpen without putting a lot of, taxing, innings on your starters. So I think that as good as the starters have been from a quality perspective, the fact, as you mentioned, going deep into games, that also keeps the bullpen fresh. And if the Braves can have both their starting pitching and bullpen elite, that can allow for them to continue to win games as the offense continues to try to find their success once again.
Yeah, I mean it's been incredible. I mean it's a especially with the top three guys like you said of Max and Sale and Ronaldo. When your starters are going 7 innings, 8 innings, 9 innings, like Max has done, I mean you have to be able to give your bullpen off days even when you don't have off days. Like in the best two ways to do that are either your starters are pitching deep into games or your offense is destroying teams and you have, 3 or 4 blowouts and all the best guys in your bullpen get a day off. And obviously the second part of that is not happening right now. The Braves aren't blowing anybody out really. And so the best way to give your bullpen off days when you don't have off days on the schedule is what Max did tonight and what Max has done the last few times and what Chris Sale has done and what Ronaldo has done. And that's 7, 8, 9 innings of elite baseball. And man, I mean, incredible dividends later in the year when your best relievers are still healthy, still fresh, because they're not having to cover 4 innings every night. So yeah, it's huge, and it has long term, snowball kind of effects towards your bullpen as you get into September and October.
And you just mentioned it right there, Stephen. When we get into September, October, and how this team is going to look. What about this team is really going to stand out to put it in a better position this year compared to the past 2 years? Well, one thing obviously that as good as the pitching will be and as awesome as hopefully it will remain. One thing that definitely is not going to be there, and it's rather unfortunate, and this is the first time we've talked about it since it occurred, is the fact that Ronald Acuna Jr. is now done for the season with a torn ACL. Obviously, as everybody in Braves country knows by now, this is the second time in his career. Back in 2021, the same thing happened. This is the second time that Ronald Acuna Jr. has suffered a torn ACL injury. And Stephen, the first thing that stands out to me that just absolutely is disheartening, unfortunate, what have you, is the fact that Ronald Acuna Jr., I know that nearly every player who plays Major League Baseball loves playing the game. That's why they play it. But I find it that there's very few, if any, whose love for the game adds to a talent level that is generational when it comes to Ronald Acuna Jr. We have seen very few that have the overall level of impacting the game to the extent that Ronald Acuna Jr. can. Power, speed, at the plate, in the field, what have you. I mean, when you talk about 5-tool players, Ronald Acuna Jr. is right up there with basically anyone when it comes to natural talent that's played in the game over the past several decades. And thankfully, we've seen last year the peak of what that could look like. But the fact that a good part of the early part of his career as he's entering his prime has been limited now because of injuries is so unfortunate. So the first thing that stands out to me is not just what's been taken away from us at times, but what's been taken away from him in terms of his, how much he loves to play and how much he impacts the game. It's just very disheartening. Listen, I know Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to come back. He's still going to be, one of the best in the game when he does. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the case. It just stinks that a good portion of the early part of his career has been impacted by injuries. But of course, there's also the impact that it has to the Braves. At the start of the season, as you pointed out, Spencer Strider was the Cy Young favorite, was the odds-on favorite to win the Cy Young. Ronald Acuna Jr. was the odds-on favorite to win the MVP, repeating from last year. When you look at the reason why the Braves were consistently considered to be the favorite, World Series-wise, the best team in baseball over the past few years, the reason why was because of Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr. The difference the Braves had from that combination compared to the rest of baseball is what sets them apart. And now with both of those players being done for the season, I'm not saying the Braves can't win the World Series. They probably still have top 5 odds in the game, but what separates them from other teams seems to be less of a margin for error now with Strider and Acuna out. So without a doubt, I don't know if that was the best way to put how the impact of Ronald Acuna Jr. will impact the Braves, but it's a devastating loss, both in terms of him and for the Braves themselves.
Yeah, I mean it's brutal. I don't, we were all watching Sunday, and I mean, as soon as he did it, I mean, anything with him scares you, right? Like if he goes down in a heap like the way he did, I mean, you just fear the worst because we've seen the worst. And he was kind of upbeat after the game, and there was some talk of maybe it wasn't so bad. And then, because it was a day game on Sunday, they got back to Atlanta. They immediately did the imaging, and we got the news Sunday night that it was not only a tear of the ACL, but a complete tear. I mean, this is the second time he's had a full tear of an ACL, and obviously this time it's his left knee, and the last time it was his right one. And it's brutal. And there's a whole impact to the team that matters. But the person I feel worse for is him, because he is obsessed with baseball. He is obsessed with baseball to a level that we almost never see. When other guys are on the at the beach in December, Ronald's playing baseball. And when they're fishing or hunting in January, Ronald's playing baseball. All Ronald does is play baseball, and he is obsessed with it. He plays so much baseball that people actually get mad at him for playing too much baseball. They think it's a detriment to him, and that's a whole separate conversation we can have. But he's obsessed with it, and for the second time in his career, it's just been ripped away from him for probably close to a year before he's back being the guy he was. So I feel awful for him. The team baseball doesn't work like other sports. This is not like the Timberwolves losing Anthony Edwards, or the Mavs losing Luka, or like the Chiefs losing Patrick Mahomes. I mean, this baseball works differently. The Braves are still going to be one of the best teams in baseball. They still have one of the best rosters in baseball. They're still going to have some of the best World Series odds in baseball, just because they've done a tremendous job building an elite team with tons of depth. And this is why you build depth. So one guy going down, or two guys going down in the Braves case, Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr. doesn't just kill your year. So the Braves are going to be fine overall. They still have everything they want to accomplish. They have the talent to do so. Brad made the point, and I agree with it, that this team is way more talented than the team that was left in 2021 after Ronald got hurt. And that team obviously won the World Series. So everything they want to accomplish is still in front of them. So, the person I feel worse for right now is Ronald himself. And then obviously the fans who miss out on getting to see one of the best players I've ever seen play baseball for probably the next 9 or 10 months. So that part's brutal. But, for the team, they've got some stuff they got to figure out. We're going to talk about here in a minute. There's a big hole that's left at the top of that lineup, and it's going to be interesting to see how they, the adjustments they make kind of with this new reality.
Absolutely. And so where does the ripple effect occur? Ronald Acuna Jr., when we talk about just how impactful he is, there's really been 2 seasons where Ronald Acuna Jr., 2020 was shortened by the pandemic. 2021 was obviously his ACL tear. 2022 was recovering from that. But what he did in 2019 at his age, and what he did in 2023 at his age, we've literally not seen before. We may have seen what he did in 2019, but just it's been very rare. And of course, we've not seen before what he did in 2023. So it goes without saying, you're not going to replace a Ronald Acuna Jr. You're not. And that's not going to be the focus, I feel, of what the Braves are going to do. But as you mentioned, one of the things that separates the Braves, even if they've lost Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr., is the incredible depth that they have and the quality of that depth. But now the hope is it's even more important for that depth to play to its quality. And that starts with, the leadoff spot. Ronald Acuna Jr. is incredible in that spot. And you mentioned it on X during the game. The one thing that stands out about Ronald Acuna Jr., even with all his batted ball struggles this year, he still did an incredible job of getting on base. And of course, the threat that he was when it came to getting on base. If there is a player in theory who can stand out as being anywhere in the stratosphere close to what Ronald Acuna Jr. did when he was on the base pass, it was Michael Harris II. But as you mentioned, things have to be figured out for that top spot. Michael Harris II against right-handers, Ozzie Albies against left-handers. Those, in theory, seem to be good options, but they have to be able to get on base. And one of the things that I think that stands out the most, as I think you're going to break down here, the Braves have got to figure out who's going to get on base for them in that leadoff spot.
Yeah, I mean, with all the homers and stolen bases last year, it's easy to think that, the speed power combo of Acuna is kind of what sets him apart. But in reality, for this team, the thing that set Acuna apart from everybody else is his ability to get on base at an absurd rate. I mean, he's run, 380, 390, 400 on base percentages most of his career, which of course is elite. And, the Braves just don't have that. The Braves have plenty of guys who slug, right? Like if they have a slugger go down, there's like 6 guys that can take that job. And the low OBP, high slugging percentage guy is very, very well represented in the Braves lineup. And they've built a lot of their lineup off of that. But the high OBP, high slug guy is, those are hard to find anyways, obviously, because those are the elite of elite players. But even just the purely high OBP guy is not really a position the Braves have outside of Acuna. And that's what made Acuna so valuable to this lineup and so special to this lineup is he has a specific skill, which is he's always been an elite, ball strike guy. He doesn't swing at bad pitches. Typically, he takes a ton of walks. Even this year, when he hasn't been right at the plate all year, he had like a 13% walk rate this year, which is elite. And that just carries his OBP to levels that no one else on the roster can even touch. And the only guys that can even come closer, like Matt Olson, Marcell Ozuna, guys who you typically wouldn't see in the leadoff spot. So, that's what the Braves are going to have to figure out. They don't have a guy like they have guys who have the body type to be leadoff hitters. Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies, Jared Kelenic. Those guys, in terms of how they play the game, they could be leadoff hitters, but they don't have that high OBP skill that Ronald has. And so, yeah, what do they do? I talked about this on Twitter or X or whatever the hell you call it now. I talked about this tonight, but when Jorge Soler came over in 2021, people remember the big home runs he hit. But the biggest thing he did for the Braves when he came over in 2021 is he ran like a 360, 370 OBP. And so the Braves could put him at the top of the lineup, and that covered up Ronald's most valuable skill. And that's what they need. They either need Michael, they need Ozzie, they need Kelenic. They need somebody to fill that OBP role at the top of the order. Because like I said, even in a down year for Ronald this year so far, he's got like a 360 on base percentage. Well, none of those guys have anything close to that. Like all of those guys are single digit walk rate guys. They're very aggressive hackers. They swing at a lot of bad pitches. The OBP is not really their primary skill. And those are going to be the guys that are called on to replace Ronald until Alex can go make a move. So I'm very interested to see what they do. I think you're right. I think it's probably going to be Ozzie against lefties and Michael against righties. Michael did have 2 walks tonight, which is a good sign. Maybe being in the leadoff spot will force him to fix his biggest flaw, which is learning how to take bad pitches and not swing at them. And maybe this will be the best thing for him because he knows he's got to set the table. And, this will be a catalyst for him kind of fixing this massive hole in his game. But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take him kind of flipping the script on what he's done so far in his career and becoming a different kind of player. If he can't do it, if Ozzie can't do it, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. Alex will obviously probably be aggressive at the deadline to try to add guys, but it's still kind of early for that. We're still probably a month out from that being a realistic thing. So it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch is how the Braves handle leadoff and the guys they put there, how they do at Ronald's most critical skill, which was not hitting homers, it was not stealing bases. His most critical skill was getting on base in an elite clip, and that's what the Braves don't really have a ready-made replacement for. So that's going to be a big thing to watch.
The one thing, though, that I will say that I applaud Brian Snicker for is because, listen, again, nothing's going to make up for the loss of Ronald Acuna Jr. But while the performance in that leadoff spot is incredibly important, and I think that you're absolutely on the spot for this lineup, what's going to probably be missed most is Ronald Acuna Jr. Not only being on base consistently, but what he did on the base pass. But if that is something that's going to be found either, infrequently for now, maybe they find a high OBP guy at the trade deadline. That remains to be seen. But I will applaud Brian Snicker because, again, while nothing's going to make up for the loss of Ronald Acuna Jr., getting Shawn Murphy and Austin Riley back the day after he got hurt is at least a nice, reaction or response to what occurred. And now you've got Austin Riley, Marcelo Ozuna, um, um, and Matt Olson there, 2, 3, and 4. Some nights you'll see Ozzy Albies in that fifth spot. Some nights you'll see Shawn Murphy in that fifth spot. But Riley, Ozuna, and Olson, I like that setup, especially with how Ozuna tonight, once again, hitting the big home run to give the Braves the lead that they did not relinquish. Riley, Ozuna, and Olson. That is a nice stack there to support the leadoff spot, and it's nice to see those guys 2, 3, 4. I applaud that approach from Brian Snicker, and I think that as those guys round into form, and if Ozuna can sustain what he's done throughout the year, that's going to be one way to get this offense really back to being one of the best in baseball.
And I'll tell you something I'm interested to see is if they go non-traditional with a leadoff spot, like typically for leadoff spots, there's an archetype. You go kind of smaller guy, it's got some speed, but that isn't necessarily the best thing to put leadoff. Like the best thing to put in your leadoff spot is an elite OBP guy, regardless if he's small or fast. The Phillies have done this with Kyle Schwarber for years now, where like Schwarber's just an elite on base guy. He walks a ton. He gets a bunch of hits. He's like a 380 on base guy. So they put him leadoff, even though he's not a typical, body for a leadoff hitter. And so like Shawn Murphy, for example, is a guy who I think for his career, I looked this up the other day after Ronnie got hurt, just so to have it off the top of my head. But I think for his career, like Murphy's like a 340 OBP guy, um, which is not, it's not Ronald territory, but it's solid. So I do wonder if they go non-traditional and maybe try to put somebody whose body type maybe you wouldn't necessarily think would be a leadoff hitter, just to get a guy to get on base. My guess is they're going to keep running Ozzy against lefties and Michael against righties, and just make those guys prove they can't do it. But I am interested to see it, because it's such a skill that the Braves kind of struggle with outside of Acuna. I'm very interested to see what they do. And again, in 2021, they got saved because one, Ronald got hurt right, and he got hurt in July, so it was right near the deadline, so they could immediately make moves. And not only did they immediately make moves, but again, a guy like Jorge Soler came in and really took that job over and became a really good, top of the order OBP guy. In this situation, it's May. Going to immediately get a guy is going to be much more difficult. It's going to have to be internal options, probably for at least a month. So, do they just roll Ozzy versus lefties, Michael versus righties, and just let it play out how it plays out? Do they go non-traditional? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. My guess is they'll probably stick with Ozzy and Michael, but Snit, I think, will be aggressive with it. When Ronald's in there, the lineup is pretty set, but without Ronald, I could see things moving around quite a bit depending on how different guys are going. And I wouldn't be stunned at all if they went non-traditional for a couple of games just to maybe shake some things loose. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch.
But of course, as mentioned, of course, with the loss of Ronald Acuna Jr., for the season, that was the big, roster shakeup that occurred over the past several days. But it was one of many things that occurred, Stephen. We did see, as mentioned, the return of Austin Riley as well as Shawn Murphy. We also saw, veteran infielder Joey Wendell. I think it may have been within the same day, but in at least 48 hours of each other, we saw him be signed by the club and then designated for assignment by the Braves. You see that quite a bit at times, but it's just, it's always crazy to see. But one other move that has occurred over the past week that, obviously was alluded to, but I don't think has been discussed enough because of, what has happened, with Ronald Acuna Jr. is the fact that last Thursday, after his season debut, AJ Smith-Shawver, unfortunately, it was revealed that he had suffered a grade 2 oblique strain that's likely going to keep him out for maybe up to 2 months. And that's, definitely disheartening to see for him as well, with, the great start that he had in his season debut, how he's looked at times in the minor leagues also. But the Braves continue to have this open spot, this open fifth spot in the rotation now that Spencer Strider is down and nobody's really claimed that spot. Well, that's led to a bit of a surprise promotion when it comes to the Braves, and it's another top prospect coming up in Spencer Schwellenbach. Now, this may surprise some that it's not, Hurston Waldrop, but Spencer Schwellenbach, by many who cover the Braves minor leagues, has been looked at for a time now as maybe being the most polished, the most MLB-ready starting pitching prospect that the Braves have. That doesn't mean he has the highest ceiling per se, but it means that he's someone who can come in and do exactly what the Braves need their pitchers to do when they're not afraid to sell. Put the Braves in a position to win. Schwellenbach gets the start on Wednesday against the Nationals. Kind of an easy opportunity set up against, a team that the Braves should be able to beat, but a very interesting and very intriguing move by the Braves. And listen, there's opportunity there. If Schwellenbach comes out and does well, he can definitely lay claim to this spot. It'll be exciting to see what he can offer.
I'm not going to say the Braves are desperate because, if you're 10 games over 500, I don't think you're desperate. And if you have a 98% chance of making the playoffs, I don't think you're desperate. But the Braves are aggressively searching for a answer to that fifth starter job. Obviously when Spencer went down, everybody got bumped up a spot, so that fifth starter spot became open. And the Braves have tried. They tried Alan Winans there, it didn't go well. They tried Vines there, it didn't go well. They tried Elder there, it really, really didn't go well. Smith-Shawver came in, looked good, but then of course he hurt his oblique, and we know that could be a couple months. They've got some other guys that they don't really seem like all that interested in trying. And like you said, Schwellenbach has been probably the best pitcher in the organization from a prospect perspective since the year started. Brad and Garrett Spain, one of our buddies from Battery Power, did a show about 2 weeks ago going over the minor league team. If you didn't listen to that episode, you should, because they talked about Spencer quite a bit in that episode. Because again, like you said, a lot of the people that follow the minor leagues will tell you that he's been the best pitcher of that group this year, and he was the most major league ready guy, even more than Schwalber, even more than Hurston Waldrop. And he's not some random guy. I mean, I think MLB Pipeline has him like the number 3 overall prospect for the Braves. So like, this is a guy that's got prospect pedigree. So it's not just some random guy that's getting hot. There's real talent behind there as well. So it's going to be interesting what he looks like. The job is going to be his if he takes it and does well. The Braves are desperate just for any sort of decent pitching out of that spot. It's been, other than what Smith-Shawver gave him the other day, it's been a pretty, it's been a disaster pretty much for every guy that's come out of there. Since, I think Darius Vines had like one good start right after Spencer got hurt, but since then it's been a kind of a revolving door of terrible. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks tomorrow. And if he looks good, I expect he'll be up for a while because they don't really have another option, and they desperately need somebody to take that job and at least give the team a chance to win the game. When he pitches, you're not looking for like 7 shutout innings, but like, don't give up 8 runs. It would be kind of what the Braves are looking for. Don't lose the game in the first 3 innings. So, and the way the offense is going or not going at the moment, it's tough when you give up 5 or 6 runs in the first 2 innings. The game kind of feels over. So It'll be very interesting to see how he looks. I've never watched him pitch. I'm not a minor league guy, so I'll be watching just like everybody else just to see what he looks like. And if he, it'd be huge if he can come out and give the Braves a solid start.
Absolutely. And if he does that, if he's able to give the Braves, the solid start that they need, then that sets up Atlanta, for the rest of this week to kind of be in a good spot, right? You after, if Swellenbach can get the job done, and they're going to be facing, pretty quality competition with Mackenzie Gore on the mound for the Nationals, but they face the Nationals again on Thursday. But then Thursday through Sunday for the rest of this week, that 3 of the games are at least going to be started, by Lopez, as well as, probably, Chris Sale, as well as either Charlie Morton or Max Fried. The point that I'm getting at is that last week I talked about how this stretch that the Braves are going through, where they're facing the Pirates for 3, Nationals for 4, and Athletics for 3, this was really going to be an opportunity for the Braves to kind of get right, hopefully, and make things happen, get back to their winning ways. Well, of course, it's worked out about as worse as we possibly could think. The loss of Ronald Acuna Jr., 2-3 through this, 10-game stretch, through the first 5 games of this 10-game stretch. If Swellenbach can give them a good start tomorrow, they can get that second straight win. Then the Braves are set up really good to have a good weekend, I think, against the Nationals and Athletics, but they need to take advantage of it. This Braves team, they're starting to get back to being able to have success against opposing teams' bullpens, but if they could start to score runs early in games, give their pitchers leads to work with, now is the time to do it. I know we've been saying that in different variations now for 6 weeks, but now, Steven, it really seems like, I don't want to say there's extra pressure on the Braves because it's May, but it really seems like a good time for them to get going, and the setup is there for them to do exactly that, scoring runs early in games and hopefully putting a stretch of wins together.
Yeah, I mean, getting Riley and Murphy back obviously helps. There's just more depth in the lineup. Obviously, they lost Acuna, so that stings. And it was a real, it was a real kick in the gut because literally the day that they were going to get Murphy and Riley back and have their full lineup, Ronald gets hurt the day before. So, but yeah, having Murph and Riley back will help, but back will definitely help. But the Braves, Michael Harris needs to get going. Kelnick needs to get going. Matt Olson kind of comes and goes. You can kind of see it coming a little bit. I don't know. Maybe they're just waiting for June 1st, like they have the last couple years. We'll see. But yeah, the offense, I mean, I tweeted it out. Like the Braves are doing a really weird thing right now where they've played 24 games this month. They're 12-12. So they've got 12 wins and 12 losses this month. In the 12 losses, they've given up 3 runs or more. In the 12 wins, they've given up 2 runs or less. So that means anytime the Braves have given up more than 3 runs in a game this month, they lost. So the only time they're winning games is if they're getting like truly elite pitching. And that's just a really inconsistent way to go through a season because you're not going to throw shutouts every night. Like you're going to have games where you give up 3 runs. You got to be able to score 5. And the Braves haven't done that once in the month of May. So, the offense has got to get back going. It's got to be able to cover up when the pitching staff isn't perfect. Because right now, the only way the Braves are winning games is if the pitching staff is damn near perfect. They need Max to go 8 innings and 8 shutout innings. They need Sale to go 7 shutout innings. Like these are the only way the Braves are winning games at the moment. So that's not going to last. You got to be able to cover up some sometimes when the other team scores some runs. And so, yeah, they need the offense. Obviously, without Acuna, it's going to be even harder, especially in leadoff spot. But hopefully, getting Murph and Riley back, getting Olson going, maybe getting Harris or Kelnick going, Ozzy. Hopefully, June 1st is kind of the magic elixir again, like it's been the last couple years, and this team takes off.
Absolutely. And do you just hope at some point in time that this Braves offense, again, I know that they've kind of been in a shuffle, they've been in a flux, and the loss of Ronald Acuna Jr. certainly doesn't help. But now with Riley and Murphy back, the one thing that I will say is that, since Murphy's been out since the start of the season, this is the first time that despite Ronald, you've seen this offense, at its full level of health. You've had Riley out a few weeks. You've had Ozzy Albies out a few weeks. But this offense can now finally look at itself and say, okay, this is how it's going to be for the rest of the year. You're not going to have Ronald Acuna Jr., but at the very least, we have everybody else healthy. And with our pitching staff being as well as it is, maybe we could take a little bit of pressure off ourselves and just trust our at-bats. Trust the natural ability that we have to get the job done. It does certainly seem as if at times that many of these at-bats, I know that they look like they're horrible. There's no playing at all, but it also looks like that there's just a ton of pressure on this offense at times that they're putting on themselves. Maybe now with, them being, at full strength outside of Ronald, maybe there's a little pressure they could take off themselves. A little bit of relaxation can occur and they can get the job done more often like we expect them to. But Stephen, obviously a lot to cover in this show. Again, I'm ready to get back to, where the show's mostly positive, where we don't have a lot of negative things to talk about. And hopefully this could be the start of a good stretch of winning. But anything else you have for this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
Nope, just go make sure to check out the other shows. Brad did a show with Grant, a longtime friend of the show. And it was fantastic. Obviously, and then Brad had to come right back on and do the emergency podcast because we learned about Acuna. We've had some guests on the show. Like I said before, Brad did the show with Garrett about the minor league system that is much more relevant now that Spencer's coming up to pitch. So definitely go listen to that. But yeah, go check out the shows. Check out the whole network. We're part of the Foul Territory Network. They've got multiple shows. They've got Cubs. They've got Dodgers. So it's a expanding network. We appreciate those guys. They've been incredibly helpful to us. And as always, we are incredibly grateful to the fans that have listened. The support we've gotten since we've made the move has been tremendous. So big shout out to you guys, and we appreciate it as always.
Absolutely. And that's the great thing about the podcast being available as frequently as it is. Listen, every show is going to be relevant. Even if the show may be a couple of days old, the content that's there, especially when we have guests, stays true. Some of the things that I talked about when it came to talk with Buster Olney nearly 2 weeks ago, they're now more true than ever. So, just always make sure that you're checking out the shows, and it's not just the latest show that's worth listening to. Some shows, as Steven talked about when it came to Brad and Garrett, the relevance of those shows, they increase in time because, now we see Spencer Schwellenbach on the mound for the Braves on Wednesday. And of course, we'll be back with you once again later this week, multiple times talking about the Braves as they wrap up their series against the Nationals and of course take on the Athletics this weekend. But for Stephen Tolbert, @B_Outliers on Twitter, my name's Shawn Coleman @StatsSAC on Twitter. Find Hammer Territory at Hammer Territory across all forms of social media. Until next time, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.